Our plans for the 2019-20 program year include the implementation of congregational mini-sites into mnys.org to provide an up-to-date web presence for all our congregations. We will also introduce a series of communications best practices workshops to help empower our congregations. These quadrant workshops will provide an opportunity for our rostered ministers and lay leaders to learn more about simple and inexpensive ways to communicate with their audiences, offering useful insights in areas such as editing, designing, PR, and strategy. We will also create free resources for our leaders by curating a series of how-to videos that will cover topics of communication best practices. Some of the topics covered in this strategy will include how to set up a basic website, how to create an impactful email program, and how to create and build social media profiles. But do not fret. We haven't forgotten about the little ones in our congregation. Because we care about them and their faith formation, we will launch our first standalone mobile app for our children. This app features games, music, and Bible stories that align with our radically welcoming and community-driven Lutheran identity. Let us continue sharing the good news of the gospel around New York and around the world. Thank you for helping us to be church together.
Yes, it is a great year to proclaim the good news, and much of the printed matter that you saw in the video is available in massive quantities on our table just out there. Please take it home so that we don't have to. I'm very very grateful for the work of all the members of the Claim Committee, along with Deacon Margie, and for Roberto Lara, who is our Director of Communications, for Marit Ofstrom, who is beginning work at building church together and to proclaim the good news in Metro New York. May being church together continue to unite us with one another, with our communities, and with God as we embark on each of these spirit-filled endeavors. Thank you.
What's Metropolitan New York Synod doing? That was the first in our strategic plan, and now we have confronting racism, and I invite Pastor Marcia Parkinson Harrison to address our assembly. Oh, and Becca Seeley, my neighbor.
Good afternoon. My name is Becca Seeley.
And my name is the Pastor Marcia Parkinson Harrison, and I serve as a co-chair to the Anti-Racism Committee.
So do I. So, as you may remember, the Anti-Racism Committee came into existence in 2016 after the 2015 Synod Assembly voted overwhelmingly to integrate ongoing anti-racism work into our life together as a Synod. Since that time, we've been working to empower the Synod and its congregations and our communities.
What that means is that that racism still exists. That's the bad news. Go ahead.
That is the bad news. But one way that we're working to confront that bad news is by continuing to offer anti-racism trainings on an ongoing basis. We were particularly happy to offer bilingual training this year, as well as trainings focused on internalized racism. We'll continue to offer trainings in the year to come, so if you have not yet attended or you just want to go deeper, we really urge you to do that this year.
This year for 2019, we have the Every Congregational Challenge, artists challenging every congregation in the Senate to engage in one intentional time of learning and conversation about racism. We have put together resources and discussion guides for you to use in this context. So we are challenging you to talk about racism. What are we doing for you? No. What are we doing for you? Challenging you to talk about racism. All right, let's repeat that again. What are we doing for you?
We're just challenging you to talk about racism.
Amen. Go ahead.
And what an amazing challenge it is. We have a variety of topics that you can choose from as you meet this challenge, or something else entirely, but we have resource and conversation guides outside at our table covering the topics of white privilege, mass incarceration, the church and racism, internalized racism, and racism and immigration. So some really interesting things and different ways you can dive in. So there are videos you can watch, there are book studies you can do, there are articles you can read, a whole host of things. So we're really excited that wherever your congregation is, there should be something there that you can sink your teeth into together.
And we also have a forum this Saturday at 9 a.m. Please come and get involved. As the bishop said, ask not what anti-racism can do for you, but what you can do for anti-racism. Amen? All right. There you go.
Thank you.
They're a great team and a great resource. We are a sanctuary synod. Pastor Fabian Arias and Christopher Vergara, I invite you forward.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Answering the call to take care of the stranger among us, we declared ourselves a sanctuary synod and a welcoming synod in the ELCA's Amparo network at our last synod assembly. The word amparo in Spanish means the protection of a living creature from suffering or damage. The ELCA's strategy to accompany migrant minors with protection, advocacy, representation, and opportunities, amparo, was envisioned after witnessing the plight of children who were and continue to be forced to flee their communities because of complex and interrelated reasons, including chronic violence, poverty, environmental displacement, and a lack of opportunities in El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. At its March meeting, the Synod Council once again answered a call to care for migrant minors in our synod by establishing our synod's Sanctuary and Amparo Ministry. The Sanctuary Amparo Ministry aims to provide regular word and sacrament ministry and pastoral care to minors in immigration detention centers in our synod. Lead and coordinate participation by members of this synod in the weekly Jericho Walk around Federal Plaza that we are organizing by conference. Create a sanctuary youth group that coordinates monthly outings with minors in detention. Organize trainings throughout our synod pertaining to becoming foster parents and or guardians to minors who are released from custody. I just recently did this and now have a wonderful 19-year-old son, I should say. Because son is what you call somebody you take care of and they don't answer your texts. coordinate with the ELCA Amparo Network, and recommend and coordinate opportunities for the Synod to engage in immigration-related public policy. Now that may seem like a daunting list, which is why the bishop has appointed a sanctuary ministry team to oversee and make this come to life. The team works in collaboration with the assistant to the bishop for global and multicultural mission and includes the Reverend Juan Carlos Ruiz, the Reverend Heidi Newmark, myself, and the Reverend Fabian Arias as our sanctuary ministry coordinator. So what have we been up to? The team worked for weeks and weeks to schedule the first outing of our sanctuary youth group with children from the Cayuga Center in Harlem. And we are excited to say we had our first outings a couple of weeks ago. On May 3rd, in partnership with the Office of the Mayor's Center for Faith and Community Partnerships, Community Affairs Unit, we took 50 unaccompanied migrant minors rock climbing at the Cliff in Long Island City. We remembered that no matter what borders or walls we confront, with the help of God, we can overcome them. On Saturday, May 4th, in partnership with the Consulate of El Salvador, we held a field day on Randall's Island led by the Gotham Knights Rugby Football Club. During our outings, pastoral care was made available to the children to pray or just talk to the pastor Arias, who was with us. The sanctuary team continues to work to get access into the detention centers, where we hope to provide regular pastoral care to the children being held there. As faith-based organizations and coalitions continue to lead the fight against our immigration system, faith leaders and organizations are finding it harder than before to gain access to these centers. We are resolved in gaining access as we have confirmation from our social workers who work in these centers that many of the children often ask to speak with a pastor or priest or would like the opportunity to have a church-like experience. And some would just like to pray for their parents or for their families. So we're going to keep you posted about that. As part of our ministry for the Synod, Sanctuary Ministry Coordinator Pastor Arias has found a group of lawyers who are willing to work with people on their immigration-related issues. So we are proud to set up MNYS Immigration Legal Clinic that will keep regular clinic hours on Sunday afternoons and Wednesday evenings at Zion St. Peter's Church in Manhattan for now. However, if a congregation or conference would like to set up a pop-up special clinic at your ministry site, we will work to coordinate to make that happen, so let us know. To provide the proper resource to do this work, the Synod Council also created the Sanctuary Ministry Fund. The monies will be used to help fund this ministry, but also to pay bonds to release individuals from detention and to help pay for fees associated with applying for asylum. Understanding that the need is great and the fund is not unlimited, we have decided to focus our efforts on minors as defined by New York State to be 21 years or younger. As we try to be intersectional in our work, when we are able, we will focus our efforts on those who are doubly marginalized by our immigration system: single mothers, queer persons, indigenous people. The Synod has already paid the bonds to release 3 migrant minors from detention, 2 who were fleeing persecution and were being victimized in the detention center because of their sexual orientation, and is in the process of paying the asylum processing fees for an 8-year-old girl who is being separated from her mother, who has already been granted asylum. This is a new tactic where parents are being granted asylum, but the children are being deported and the parents are being asked to pick. As far as actions that we can take, advocacy actions we can take on today, I want to add we are, as many of you might have heard, one of our very own Lutheran preachers was recently ripped out of her home in Racine, Wisconsin. Apparently agents came in wielding guns and arrested her in front of her 5-year-old granddaughter. She, Betty Rendon, fled to the U.S. from Colombia after armed guerrillas attacked the school where she taught, and serves in a church in Wisconsin as a synodically authorized lay minister while she's studying to get her doctorate at the seminary in Chicago. Local religious leaders just held an interfaith prayer vigil outside the detention center where Pastor is being held, and national Lutheran leaders have called on federal officials to release her from detention. Apparently, Bishop informed me that around noon today, they have started receiving letters and petitions as they're trying her case. So I invite you to go to the Metro New York Synod Facebook page, where we have a link there where we can sign on through a petition through Faithful America to say that we want our Lutheran pastor out of detention. Please, this is something we can all do. While only having been formed recently, our Sanctuary and Empower Ministry has been very busy at work, and we would like to share more details of the work that we do and how your congregation or you as individuals could get involved. So I invite you to our forum on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. So we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Gracias.
Thank you for this developing ministry and advocacy. Next, Vibrant Congregations. Hazel Goldstein will address our assembly. There she is.
Thank you, Bishop. It's been my privilege to serve on the Gathered Committee for the past 6 years, the last several as chairman. We have a truly dedicated committee, and I would like to ask those in attendance to stand and be recognized, both current and past members. I know some of you are out there. Come on, stand up. Thank you. Thank you. Please recognize them for all their hard work. They make it easy to work with. They're talented, purposeful, and we have fun as well, so good times. My short talk will have some movement on your parts, so please pay attention, follow direction. I'm just going to highlight a few things that the committee has accomplished over the last years, and if you or your congregation were a beneficiary of any of the grants or trainings that the committee has initiated, I'll ask you to stand. The opportunities presented by this committee are numerous and have been able to reach many in the Synod. Leadership grants have impacted many of our leaders and through them our congregations. If you have been the recipient of a leadership grant, please stand. Thank you. Thank you for your willingness to lead and share your knowledge with so many. Capital Improvement Challenge grants. Over the years, we have given out close to $2 million to different congregations for needs to upgrade, maintain, and improve their facilities. Because of these grants, if your congregation has received a grant, please stand. There's a lot of you. Thank you so much. If you were the one filling out the paperwork, we especially thank you. It's a lot of work. If you were the people that raised the matching monies, we thank you for that, and the follow-through for the opportunities that this grant represented for your congregations. It's made a huge difference. Partnership grants. These grants help congregations in transition and those in need of special assistance. These grants can often help a congregation maintain itself while they begin to create new opportunities for ministry. If your congregation has received a partnership grant, please stand. I know you're there. You can't be the only people in the back. Come on, partnerships, I know you're out there. Thank you very much. And that concludes my report. Less than 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thanks for all the work that is done by your committee. Project redevelopments. The law firm of Capel, Barnett, Madeline and Schoenfield has served the Metropolitan New York Synod for decades. Partners Joseph Milano, Renato Mattis, Peter Sanders, assisted by several associates, have represented our synod and provided us with valuable legal counsel and advice over the last several years. We're pleased to have them with us today. We thank them for their work. At our September 2018 Synod Council meeting, Renato made a presentation to our Synod Council members on several exciting congregational projects that were in various stages of development. At the conclusion of that presentation, the Synod Council members requested that Renato be present and make a report to this Synod Assembly. So I invite Renato Mattis to the platform. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Bishop McCoy, Vice President Renee Wicklund, the Synod Council, and the Synod staff for this invitation to share with you some of the really exciting development projects that are going on in the Synod. As we heard earlier this morning, we are living in a critical time for churches, not just for Lutheran churches, but for all churches, as we face existential threats from all directions. By and large, congregations are dwindling, offerings are dropping, expenses are increasing, not the least of which are our large, old buildings that require a tremendous amount of investment due to significant deferred maintenance. But I'm here with stories of hope. We must, there we go, good. Assuming after we finish destroying the planet, this is all for something. But we must think and act boldly and deliberately about the long-term sustainability of our Lutheran presence in the Synod and beyond. What is mission-driven development? Mission-driven development is about redeveloping real property to build new and imagined spaces that foster and sustain the mission and ministry of our congregations, but while also creating income streams to support those endeavors. In this synod, as was said earlier, more than any other synod in the United States, I say that we have better opportunities and great opportunities to utilize the land that we own now to preserve and enhance our mission and ministries, while also working to strengthen the relationship between its churches and the surrounding communities that we serve. And what does that do? Income from our property transactions can be utilized to assist congregations with operating expenses, like paying salaries for pastors, ministers, and staff. Our new and renovated and more efficient, well-designed church space buildings can help reduce operating costs while also enticing young people into their buildings. We can reduce time spent on non-mission focused tasks. I go to so many council meetings at local churches. How much time at each of these are we spent talking about roof leaks or fundraisers for the boiler replacement? And how much of that time is spent talking about mission and ministry? Imagine if we could reverse that. We can create endowments to support the perpetual existence of the church structure and the great work that we do. And we can also use these properties in our redevelopment projects to increase educational facilities and health services and team up with nonprofits throughout the city and beyond. The Synod has been working on multiple projects and other congregations in the Synod as well, and we have been working through what's called a mission-driven development process. It is thoughtful, it is calculated, it is deliberate, it is meaningful, and it begins with developing a mission plan. So with every congregation or every worshiping community, the first thing we do is to understand, what are we doing? Why are we here? What is the purpose? And that mission plan will go into further detail. Then we talk about what are the fundamentals for effective space planning. So once we have our mission plan, what type of space do we need to accomplish that plan? We then look at what the site itself can do. What is the project feasibility? Before we then determine what the different deal structures, and I'll go into more detail on these later. then like any other corporation, we have to develop a business plan. We can't just come into this with great expectations and ideas, but not actually look at the numbers and make sure that the investment that we're putting into these are not going to come out in the end to support these ministries. And then one that I'll spend quite a bit of time for, and probably get some heat for about, is designing the church of tomorrow. And then construction oversight and accountability, and then I leave leadership to you folks. I'm going to be taking you through two case studies today, and we're exploring two development projects that are currently in construction. And then I'm going to conclude by sharing some of the updates on some of the other Synod projects that are various stages of the development process. Most of these are going to be new construction, but one is likely to be a total gut renovation to show you how this process can work for your church, even if it doesn't involve the demolition of a church building or the building of a new one. How we can take this and use it for an existing church building. The first case study, my friend and brother, Pastor Paul Milholland, and his had a visionary group of strong lay leaders. And so this is the parking lot that's across the street from the church building. There's a church building, a school building in Long Island City / Astoria, and this was a vacant parking lot that was used just for that. And so they wanted to look at what can we do with this site to both create an increased funding to help support their mission and ministry. So we will get into that process. The other case study is Pastor Bob Gahagan and the Evangelical Lutheran Church of the Epiphany in Brooklyn, which you've heard a little bit about at a prior Synod assembly. And I can update you on where we are with this project as well. So when we develop a mission plan, we think about what are the goals of this congregation. Different congregations have different goals. I have projects in the Bronx where, for example, after-school program is very important because of the location of where it is, and so we're building full athletic facilities in the building. But I have another congregation that's in Queens, for example, that can care less about activities needed for after-school, and instead we're focusing on music ministry. What is the calling of that congregation in that community? And that is specific to where you are. But then how do you find out what that is? You actually have to interact with the community. I know, it says tough love today. I often walk into a church and I ask, so what is it that you want to have? We want more people here. We want to serve the community. When was the last time you asked the community what they needed? And then we go quiet. Step outside your church and ask, especially our churches in urban areas that have thousands of people walking by every day. Do you know how many of those people are suffering or have issues? How many times do we ask? So let's find out what the community needs. Our churches have engaged in development projects with questionnaires to the community that folks have actually returned. Neighbors have returned. The bodega down the street. We find out what these folks are in need of. It also gives you an opportunity to connect and say, hey, we're here. Consider the demographic trends when you're creating a plan. Yes, there are areas where folks are being displaced. We have to think about what the needs are of those people. We are in areas where new people are coming in. We can't forget about the needs of those coming into new communities as well. Consider what language needs and population shifts. And a lot of these resources are provided by the ELCA, and they have a lot of these figures for almost every zip code in the United States. So when we looked at Trinity Lutheran, there was a great need for residential units in the community, a portion of which for affordable housing. They wanted a long-term income to support a historic church building and trying to reduce their monthly operating expense. They also needed additional community space that was ADA accessible. And finally, parking, which would need to be replaced. Evangelical Lutheran Church of the Epiphany, and I'll tell a little quick story, which I've shared before to the Synod Council. I went to go meet with this congregation on a few years, was it 3 years ago, Pastor Gahagan? And it was the coldest day of winter. And I show up, and I open up the church door, and I saw nobody in it for the service. So I said, okay, well, here we go. And then I found out that they were worshiping across the street at the Jesus Joy Center because it was cheaper to heat that building. I walk in expecting there to be maybe 10, 15 people. There must have been about 130, 140 people, all singing and being there on the coldest day of the year, right? And when we thought about, and I asked the folks in that congregation who were there, what is it that brings you here? Most of them were either students of the school, or they were parents of children who were attending that school. And so clearly the school was a fundamental part to that. And in order to compete now as a school, we need to have modern spaces with the highest type of technology, and we cannot compete with charter schools because of the funding sources, but what we can do is help to create an endowment that will support that school in perpetuity. So we needed classroom spaces, we needed a basketball and a court, and we needed long-term income to support the school. So as we then had our mission plan, we go through the programming, where generally we explore what are the sizes of spaces we need for different rooms based on what our mission plan was. We need to consider multi-use spaces. I'm going to say that again. We need to consider multi-use spaces. We are not being good stewards of our property when the largest part of our building is used for 1 to 2 hours a day. Or a week. I was being generous. We also, and this one always gets me in trouble, pews. Right? It is rare a church that I walk into doesn't have them. It is rare a church that I walk into and I don't sit in a pew that doesn't happen to be occupied by someone's for 3 generations before, and I can't sit there either. And I would task you to remove your pews and make your spaces multi-purpose so that they can be used all week long. So this gives you a little sense at Trinity Lutheran, who they needed about a couple thousand square feet of space. They're keeping their church building in their school, but they wanted ADA accessibility. So I commend that congregation for leaving this an absolutely open space that can be used for community gatherings, it can be used for meetings, it can be used for classrooms. And so there are 2 floors of open space, 1,000 square feet or so, with bathrooms and kitchenettes on each floor so that they can bring folks in and they are ADA accessible. And this is going to be in the new building, and this will be owned by the church. With Epiphany, we're building a whole new church building. And so what's happening there is originally the consideration was to sell the church building and additional townhouses and take that money and build a new church facility next door at the Jesus Joy across the street. When I met with Pastor Gahagan, the first thing I said is, I hate the sale of church property. And I said, so if we can preserve it, we should try to do so. And what we ended up doing, and this is a great example of Synod, Mission Investment Fund, and local congregation support. We borrowed funds from Mission Investment Fund to build our church next door so that we can ground lease our site, not sell that site, ground lease it, to pay off that loan. After 25 years, I think it's $650,000 a year of net income to the church, and some throughout that for 99 years. And at the end, the church gets the property back. This is the residential property. So you'll see that this pastor also and that congregation left an open, very open concept fellowship hall. You go to the 2nd floor. This is the sanctuary, but you see all those dotted lines? Those are supposed to be movable walls, so you can use it for all different things throughout the week. And we have additional classrooms on the upper levels and more classrooms for the school. And finally, on the roof deck, there will be a half-court basketball court that can be used throughout the year. We have to understand a little bit about project feasibility. Each site can only do what it can do. And so when we start working on a project, once we've developed the mission plan and we understand what the space needs are going to be, we then look at, or simultaneously look at, what is it that we can do on this site? Sometimes we will look at it and we'll say, okay, well, does the church have a vacant lot? An example of Trinity Astoria. They have an underutilized parking lot that's not being used to its full potential. Sometimes we have a site that happens to have underutilized air rights that can be transferred to an adjoining neighbor. That's a New York City phenomenon that we are all thankful for. What are is there an opportunity? Sometimes the building that we already have can create an opportunity for rent, as we do with many of our school buildings, whether they're charter schools or UPKs. And so we need to understand what all the options are that we can utilize. So what is going to be the best option for us to accomplish the goals of our mission plan? And that is what we do throughout with the zoning analysis and surveys and looking at possible massing studies to accomplish that. So this is how Trinity Lutheran started, with a survey and a zoning analysis. What could be built? And from there, we took this and understood that we could look at all these various options and do a ground lease, and I'll explain a little bit further about that, about how we got to that. In the same thing with the Lutheran Church of the Epiphany. If you look at the slide on the left, that's actually the Jesus Joy Center, where that auxiliary building was to the church across the street. To the right, you see it actually starts with a school building, which we are maintaining, in an open parking lot. Then there's the church building and two townhouses after that. In addition to just subdividing the site so that we can maintain the additional school building and parking lot, we were able to look at this and say, well, we can ground lease the church building site and the two parish houses, the two townhouses, but we can also transfer additional development rights off of there to make more value so that our ground lease payments are higher to support that mission and ministry of that congregation. I don't want to bore you, but I want to talk briefly about some different deal structures that we use. So sometimes it's as simple as leasing part of buildings or all of buildings that are being underutilized. We look at a ground lease. Under a ground lease scenario, what we do is we lease the land itself, but the church continues to own the actual fee ownership of that property. And either 49 or 99 years, depending on the structure of the deal, after being paid income that entire time, the church will retain the property, will revert the building, and everything on that property reverts back to the church. The beauty of it is, 99 years from now, maybe the developer or any of us will be around, but the church will be around. And so we want to maintain long-term ownership of our real estate. We look at development or air rights sales. If we have a church building that's functioning for us, but there may be an ability to do transfers. This is particularly to our New York City churches. We consider joint ventures, which we'll discuss a little bit later, where congregations or the synod joint venture with a developer. We usually use this for affordable housing transactions. And then sale and church back, as I call it, the sale with condominium, is where there's not another option and we have to actually sell the site where the church is, but the newly built church facility will be part of the new building that is going to be constructed on the site. And you notice I put the outright sale last for a reason, because in my mind, it should be the last option if there's no other redevelopment opportunity. So on both of these, we looked at it and we accomplished a ground lease. In the Trinity Lutheran, it'll be a new community facility space of 2,000 square feet that'll be underneath a new residential building. In addition, we have exclusive use to, I think, 20 or 25 parking spots that will be used by the church throughout the week. On the Epiphany transaction, we have ground leased, and we're constructing a brand new church and community facility on the former site of the Jesus Joy Center. The church is also getting 2 residential apartments in the new building that will be used, one for the pastor and one for the head of school. And I want to thank the Synod again for the support, because without the support that came for the Synod for that project, we would have ended up having to sell the property as opposed to ground leasing it. Then we have to look at developing a business plan for financial sustainability. And what that means is starting off with the counting the records that we have now. And I know that's scary for a lot of us. But we start with looking at what are our traditional expenses? What are our traditional income sources? What's going to happen when we have this new building? Are we able to project how much it's going to cost to maintain a new, more energy efficient space versus the space that we have now? What does the move cost us? And so putting all that into a budget, a minimum of 15-year business plan allows us to do this in a thoughtful way. And maybe we could also include in that budget renovations of our space so that we don't end up 30 years from now with deferred maintenance again. Let's start putting into the budget a certain amount every single year so that when the roof finally goes out, we don't have to have unlimited bake sales to try to raise the money for it. Not that I'm averse to a bake sale, I'm just saying. So with Trinity Lutheran, they're budgeting funds for capital improvements to the church building, and they've gone through an aggressive capital expenditures, which has been great. They've also increased funding for the salary of a director of outreach and seed funding for future projects in the community to help with feeding programs, health fairs, and other missions. And as I mentioned in the Epiphany Church, we are utilizing the increased funds to subsidize the Epiphany School. Designing the church of tomorrow. We have to consider designing spaces that are appealing to all, especially younger individuals, which support and contemporary programming ideas. We have to consider our multi-use spaces, as we mentioned before. We also need to think about, as we're redeveloping or renovating our properties, our church buildings, that we can use textures and materials and colors that are actually appealing to people. If you consider for a moment, when you think of some of the other, and don't quote me as saying that I'm comparing us to a bank or to a CVS. However, if you think for a moment, most of these institutions have changed over time to appeal to people. There's a reason that the banks that you walk in today are all glass and you can see what's happening inside versus the ones you used to walk in 30, 40 years ago. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that you can walk by a Citibank and know it's a Citibank before you can even read the Citibank sign. There's branding that's used for that. Why can't we consider doing that so that we can have the Lutheran identity of inclusiveness and love for our neighbors be something that you can see right away, whether you're walking in the street of Brooklyn or you're in Staten Island or you're in upstate New York. We can do this. We not only can do this, we must do this. The idolatry of buildings, in my mind, can be our biggest downfall. The stone walls and wooden doors keep people out. They do not welcome people in. And I think of an example of Pastor Larry McFarland in the Church of the Epiphany, whose congregation sold their church building, which was absorbing all of their resources, both financial and energy, and they sold that and moved into a storefront in the Bronx. That congregation is growing and flourishing today because they're not spending their time on the building anymore. They're spending their time connecting with the thousands of people who walk by their storefront every day. I'm glad that we started today with my favorite scripture verse. When two or three are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Think about what that means. The height of Christianity was not when our fellowship halls and Gothic church buildings were filled by people who looked like us and spoke the same language as us and drinking tea and having coffee cake. It was when believers met in secret in caves, or when people traveled from village to village, sharing and worshiping in people's homes or wherever they could, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with all people. So let us be rid of the concept that our buildings are what make our church. This is the new building that is in construction right now at the Trinity Lutheran Church site. To the left there, which is a little hard to see in the rendering because of the trees, but to the left is going to be the entrance to, on the first floor, the new community center that Epiphany will have to use in this new building. At Trinity will have to use in this new building. Clearly a nice looking building from the upstairs as well. This is the rendering of the most recent rendering of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of the Epiphany. Doesn't it look welcoming? Doesn't it look like you can walk by? One of the things that fascinates me often is you can walk. I represent 3 or 4 churches in downtown Brooklyn. They're not all Lutheran. And I sat in one of the churches who was telling me all about the programs that they have. And nobody knows about it because you can't see inside their building. You can't tell that there's people even in that building. And so here, it will be a vibrant center for the folks, not only that are worshiping in that building, for the folks who walk by. This is the residential building that's going to be built across the street, which will include the 2 apartments that will be given back to the church for free. Once you get into the construction part, it's all about planning, understanding risks, and if you're involved in any construction project that are of significance, I strongly encourage you to hire an owner's rep. I needed a couple pictures here. So this is the construction site at Trinity Lutheran. As you can see, the foundation has now been poured, and now we're starting to build up. And this is, sorry, it's still rubble, but we're getting there. On the Epiphany site where demolition has happened, and then the foundation will be starting soon. I'd like to spend the last half of this presentation talking a little bit about some active projects that are currently going on in the Synod. Some you've heard about and some you may not have. This is Zion Lutheran Church, which was closed. As you can see, and you've heard in the past, we have been in contract for some time to do affordable senior housing project. And this property is being sold to a developer. However, in lieu of selling the property outright, what we looked at was is there an opportunity to maintain a presence here? So the Synod Council decided to maintain close to 15,000 square feet on the first floor of the building. And what does that do? Well, we turned around and entered into a lease agreement with the School Construction Authority, because one of the big needs in the community was UPK program, Universal Pre-Kindergarten. So we have a 25-year lease with the School Construction Authority to have a UPK placed in there. Besides that being close to a few $100,000 a year in income, the most important part is that we will continue to have ownership on a site in Brooklyn that 20 years from now or 25 years from now we will never be able to buy. So 25 years from now, we continue to have a presence in this area. And maybe that means that we put a new worshiping community there, or maybe we decide some other ministry is going to be there, or maybe we decide to rent it out. But we are maintaining a presence in this area, and demographic shifts, as we can see just in this location alone, is something that we need to consider so that we are not just prepared for today, so that we are prepared for 25 years from now and 50 years from now. And this is just, let me go back just for a second, quick. So it shows you a little bit here about the first floor. It's a little too small to read, but I think these materials are made available to you anyway. Good. Fordham Lutheran Church, Pastor Jonathan Reckabaron and that congregation, we are currently now with signed agreements with a developer to build a senior and multifamily affordable housing buildings that consist of 121 residential units between 2 towers. These are 100% affordable units for seniors and families. The new church unit, which is going to be around 12,000 square feet, will be built back for the church. The key is we're doing this as a joint venture because at the end of 15 years, the church has the option to take back the building for a nominal, and the developer for a nominal consideration. So the long-term decisions of this building and this site will ultimately be made by this congregation. And we continue to maintain ownership. This is a graph showing the significance of the 2 towers that are going to be built on the Fordham site. And here are some renderings of the space. And you can see the sanctuary with light coming in and glass above. I know, we will get rid of the pews. The developer put that together. Every developer who puts together a rendering shows pews because that's what they think we want. And so it is, in addition, it'll have the sanctuary space, but one of the big outreaches that this congregation would like to do is also with immigration and asylum. And so there's going to be entrances from both sides and a through street, and you'll see the excitement that they'll be here in a new space that's visible and usable from the community. And also, I believe, I don't know if we had a pastor's apartment in there, but I don't recall. That's Fordham Lutheran. Yehu's Table. This is the new worshiping community that arising from the former Holy Redeemer that entered into Synod preservation. If you haven't had a moment to speak to Reverend Lenny Duncan, I suggest you do. He's vibrant, he's perfect for that community, and I'm excited to see what's going to come out of this worshiping community. This site was zoned in a manufacturing district, which means unless you're going to put up another manufacturing building, there's nothing we can do. But instead of just saying there's nothing what we can do, we start to look at various options. And so we took a look and did a zoning analysis and said, well, perhaps there's an opportunity for us to rezone this site because there isn't a big use for manufacturing. So we prepared massing studies. We went to visit with city planning. We went to visit with local community members and the council member who are supportive of rezoning the site to turn it into residential. This project will be over 140,000 square feet. Just put a little sense to that. That's probably somewhere close to about 200 some odd units of 100% affordable housing that's going to be built, in addition to a brand new church facility for the new Yehu's Table worshiping community. Why do we have this? Why are we able to spend the amount of money it will take to rezone this site and create all of this value? It's because of your strategic plan. It's because of what you did and started to do 9-10 years ago. It's because of that plan that you're able to turn now and create a site that might be worth X dollars and make it worth so much more, because what that creates is not only a new church facility for us, it creates an endowment and an income stream for this congregation and for the synod in the long term. Also, like the other project, we are doing this as a joint venture with an option at the end of the year 15 to take out the development partner so that we ultimately can keep control of this property. And this gives you a sense, and this is again at early stages, but this is the rezoned site. And as you can see, to the right of it, you'll see it's more manufacturing, and then there's smaller homes along the end of the street, and we are tearing down to make it not look too out of place in the neighborhood. In addition to create it to about a 15,000 square foot church facility, there will also be a parsonage for the pastor. And we are looking into the possibility of having a medical facility take some of this space so that we can provide very needed medical care to an area of the city that does not have it. St. Paul's Lutheran Church. This is Pastor Fernando Otero and a very, very strong group of lay leaders. This is also a site where we're looking. We have just actually last week signed a memorandum of understanding with a development partner to rezone this property as well. And the same thing in that the church will end up with a new condominium, a brand new church facility, and we have the option at year 15. You'll see in the yellow delineated space here, this will be where the new church is with the residential coming above. And we've already started to work on some schematics that show where we have the community hall, the multi-purpose sanctuary, as well as offices, etc. Christ Center at 126th Street, and Reverend Kevin Vanderper and the former Transfiguration Lutheran that entered into Synod preservation as well. Their position, this is in Harlem. If there's a center that is experiencing gentrification, it's Harlem. And in this gentrifying community, one of the most fascinating things is that there are not that many inclusive churches. So what a great opportunity for there to be a Lutheran presence in an area where we can approach not only the folks who have lived there for the last 30, 40 years, but welcome the folks who are coming into that neighborhood and be able to worship together. And there's no better person than Pastor Vanderper to do that. And that congregation is already growing. So we've been looking at various options, including the possibility of redeveloping the entire site, or what's more likely at this point to create long-term income stream is to ground lease a parking lot that's next door to the church, totally redevelop and reimagine the church facility. This is the project that I mentioned where we have an opportunity to take this process and put it into an existing building and see how that can, and then utilize the additional income that we save to help support that mission and ministry into the future. The Mission Walk, which is the Lutheran Episcopal journey of the former site at Transfiguration Lutheran, and the current mission developer is Reverend Gladys Diaz. In this site, we are currently in talks with a charter school that is, the goal is to self-develop a brand new building, and this is the big massing study here. You see the green spaces are actually just preliminarily delineated for the church, and then the red spaces would be for the charter school. By doing this, the conversations that we're having with the charter school, they're actually not putting a school in there. They're putting their Bronx sports facility for all of their local Bronx schools. Imagine the number of children and parents that could be walking through this building every single day, and the presence that we will have at that space. And so we are continuing conversations on this project and hope to be back by next year with concrete plans. The Evangelical Lutheran Church of the Resurrection, Pastor Franklin Simpson, where we've been working for quite some time and have some hiccups along the way, but I commend Pastor Simpson for being resilient. We're working with a pretty irregular lot, as you can see here. I don't even know how they made this lot this way. The flagpole is still part of the lot, but we are now in conversations with two different developers for the construction of a senior or supportive services to take a new building that will have a brand new church facility under it, but also provide services that are for the most vulnerable in New York. So this was our process of these many projects, but isn't it remarkable to see the number of new church buildings that are being built in this synod alone? That's not happening everywhere. And so we are also currently exploring development opportunities for our suburban congregations, including senior affordable housing projects where there are larger plots of land. From affordable housing to sanctuaries for immigrants, to medical centers, to schools, to UPK programs, to feeding programs. These exciting projects are a direct result of your strategic plan in action, utilizing funds to not only ensure the long-term sustainability of this synod, but to invest wisely in its congregations so that they are not only viable, but they flourish. In close, I'd like to say that I am proud of this synod. I am proud of the work of this group of leaders of the synod, and I am confident that this synod is well prepared to address the needs of the congregations in the communities in which they serve, and as they act as centers of word and service for the next 500 years and beyond. Thank you.
Now you know why the Synod Council wanted you to receive and to hear that report. Renato, we're grateful for not only vision, but now reality. And we look forward to that continued partnership and your leadership. I think you've said that the Synod is ahead of many others, or all others, I'm not sure, in what's happening. So see that as an important sign of hope, and see it multiplied over the life of the Synod. Are we ready for the report of the second ballot, Bishop Eaton?
Bishop McCoy, yes, we are. Who is, Kevin, are you going to be? Please, Pastor O'Hara.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am pleased to say that we had 424 ballots cast. We needed 75% in order to end this process. That would have required 319 ballots to elect one person. We did not achieve that. Surprise. There were 4 invalid votes that were cast. We have these results then. Christopher Medlowski with 82 votes. Katrina Foster with 54 votes. Jonathan Lindman with 46 votes. Paul Egensteiner with 41 votes. Edward Barnett with 39 votes. A. David Angelada with 37 votes. William Baum with 34 votes. Heidi Newmark with 29 votes. Perusi Batiku with 14 votes. Harry Schenkel with 10 votes. Lamont Anthony Wells with 8 votes. Jerome Taylor with 5 votes. Robert Wollenberg with 5 votes. Leila Ortez with 5 votes. Gary Squire with 3 votes. Paul Block with 3 votes. Sonia McClary with 2 votes. James Watchard with 2 votes. Lee Miller with 1 vote. And the following receiving 0 votes: Brenda Smith, Albert W. Traiolo, and Waiveta Bullock. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's no election on the second ballot, which means we'll be moving to the third ballot, and that will happen tomorrow. The top 7, so Christopher Milowski, there you go, Mitlowski, Katrina Foster, Jonathan Lindman, Paul Egensteiner, Edward Barnett, David Anglada, and William Baum will be moving to the next ballot. I'm asking those 7 if you would please repair following this session to the bishop election room. Yep, you have to know this. You'll now learn the secret knock, so they let you in because you're here. For a little bit of an orientation and also for some prayer. And then we'll be back tomorrow then and be listening. Each of the 7 will be able then to make a 5-minute, no more, up to 5-minute address to the assembly. Bishop McCoy.
Thank you, Bishop Eaton. We now turn to announcements. Liz Hoffman.
Hello again. First and foremost, if you are leaving tonight, and I don't know why you would leave tonight when we have an exciting day tomorrow, please return your voting device and meal button to the registration desk by 6 o'clock this evening. Reminder, okay, we want to thank the Wartburg for sponsoring our coffee hour this afternoon. Dinner is being served in the Garden Terrace and the Westchester Room again. Worship is at 7:30 this evening. Our presider will be Bishop Eaton. I'm sorry, our preacher will be Bishop Eaton, and our presider will be Bishop McCoy. Did I get that backwards? The 2 of them will be here. The 2 of them will be here. Just come and listen. They'll both be great. Again, a reminder for pastors, deacons, synod council members, and other committee members, if you have not had your photo taken, please stop by the Tarrytown Room sometime during the next 2 days and have that done. Tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. in the Westchester Room, we will have a budget breakfast, and there will also be a hearing on the memorial at the same time in the other half of the Westchester Room, and yes, breakfast will also be served there. And morning prayer will be held back here in the ballroom at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call on our chaplain, Bishop John Mackholtz, to close us with prayer.
As I was walking down the hallway before lunch, a pastor of the Synod, who shall remain nameless, looked at me and yelled, "What, no puns?" And I said, I'm here to pray, not to be funny. And he said, well, we need a little humor. So a Higgs boson particle walks into church. The vicar welcomes him and says, "We don't want your sort in here." To which the Higgs boson particle replies, "But you can't have Mass without me." Let us pray. I invite you to stand, please, as you are able. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. The day you gave us, Lord, is ending. We give you thanks for this gathering that has been called to be about the work of your church in this part of your world. As we continue to discern your Spirit's movement in our midst in the election of our next bishop, call us to moments of silence and reflection and listening for your direction and guidance, that we might follow your lead and the movement of your Holy Spirit, carefully discerning your call. For your call to be at work in the world with the message of reconciliation and compassion, we praise you. Continue to move in our midst as we struggle with the realities of racism, that we might find ways to not only confront it, but finally to eradicate it. Open our hearts to be accepting of all people, regardless of who they are or where they are from, for we are all created in your image and recipients of your love and grace, and you call us to do justice and love kindness. Direct us to not only say those words and believe them, but to do them in our daily lives. In the midst of uncertainty for so many of our sisters and brothers who are immigrants in this country and the world around, we pray this day especially for the family of Betty Rendon, recently arrested by ICE. May your justice reign in her life and the lives of those who love her and who know her. Use our voices and our actions to bring about compassion and justice for Betty and all whose lives are so deeply affected. Direct us toward creating a world where all are welcome, treated as equals, and seen as people created in your image. Continue to guide us in the work that we do in revitalizing congregations and renewing people, that we might be strong witnesses of your light and love in the darkness of your world. And finally, gracious and Holy One, remind us that we are yours, claimed, marked, and sealed to be called out into your created world. Be with us now as we gather for food lovingly prepared by many hands and hearts. Bless it to our good, that it might strengthen and sustain us for the work that yet demands our attention. These things and all that is in our hearts and on our minds, we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, crucified and risen for the sake of your world. And all God's people said,
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Bishop. We are adjourned.
Next time on Traveling the Way of Love. It sounds to me like there is definitely more than just dinner here. It's actually really a full worship service. Tell me why worship and dinner have gone so well together.
I think it's all about the sacramentality, that this meal is how Jesus welcomes us. And so we turn and share that with others.
You guys have a communion service kind of built into this whole thing.
Absolutely. We start at the table by blessing the bread, and we end our meal by drinking from the cup, like Jesus did with his disciples.
Picked a good guy to work off of.
Yeah.